Hello, my name is Dan Hadaway, and this is a CyberViews interview. Today I'm bringing back the person who was in our inaugural episode, William Summers. And William actually works for infotex, and we've been very impressed with William. But William, since not everybody saw our first episode, why don't you share a little bit about yourself? Tell us about yourself.
Absolutely. I'm William Summers. I'm a data security analyst here at Infotex. I'm generally a very passionate cybersecurity enthusiast. Kind of just love the field all around. As well, I'm Infotex's homegrown AI enthusiast or quote unquote expert. I'm not an expert in whatsoever, but I do enjoy AI on the side and kind of consult and talk to Dan about it and on the podcast.
Well, and just to clarify too, I mean, I remember in the first podcast, William, you were like, I'm not an expert, but I really feel like who is an expert in AI? And you obviously have a lot of other duties on your plate, but for the record, William is the person that our company is assigned to making sure that the appropriate people at Infotex understand how AI is currently impacting our small community-based bank clients. And that's why I like interviewing him about AI. And William, we're going to talk about, I'm hoping we can get an update from that, that really we had an inaugural episode in the first season. I think you did an episode in the second season. And so we just want an update on AI. But before we go there, I have to say, on the way into the session this morning, I saw that you had put in for your name Will instead of William. And so I want to make sure I'm getting that right. Are you Will or are you William?
Interchangeable, very ambiguous there. I like to leave it that way. Will or William, I have no personal preference. It's really whatever is most comfortable for you.
Okay, but I will just probably stick to William because I'm used to that. But it's good to know that, you've got a couple options there, right? So,
Sure.
But are we ready to get started then?
I am, but quickly before then, I want to ask, what happened to your hat? You had it last time I was here.
You're right about that. William, in the first couple seasons, I wore an Italian fedora. And we're in the middle of July, which is important to get out there. I mean, I don't know when this podcast is actually going to be published, but there's a good chance that what we're talking about today could be totally eclipsed with news about AI tomorrow. But given that it's in the middle of summer, I just don't want to wear a hat anymore. So we're shaking the hat for the sake of the podcast. But AI has, really been one of those technologies that, in my opinion, banks have more quickly come up to speed on than I've ever seen before. I think that management was totally aware of at least one type of risk, the type of risk I think will never materialize, the robot risk, Terminator. And that kind of greased the machinery to where I feel pretty confident that most of my clients understand at least the basics of AI and are starting to dust off their policy writing skills and getting ready to produce their own policy. But keeping up on AI is a full-time job with which we've got you dedicating part of your full-time job too. So what's the scoop? What's changed in AI? What's new to AI since I believe it was May of 2023 when our first episode was actually published?
Well, there's been no, I would say, major breakthroughs. As frankly, ChatGPT was the breakthrough that really broke, AI into the mainstream kind of space. But there has been very consistent upgrades and models, open source software, just kind of everything growing and expanding, and the whole field kind of just getting bigger and bigger as it becomes more and more in the mainstream and more people start to adopt it into their products to, build products off of it. There's a ton of large language models now out there that have been trained by anyone. It's getting easier and easier to do it. It's getting easier and easier to run it as well, and it's all kind of just growing generally.
And so it's a platform available to any coder that knows what they're doing, and they can start training a large language model as long as they have access to large data sets. Am I right about that then?
Data sets and resources. They will probably have to rent some GPU resources, like some cloud GPU computing, to be able to actually train that model on the data sets. You can't do that yet personally, really, at least not for like really large data sets. But you can certainly run them on your own computer now, the large data sets.
But any Fortune 500 company could be training right now on the data set available to them, including everything from their own, marketing intelligence to, the data they collect on their customers to et cetera, et cetera. And so, so the risk with database banks is not if somebody out there, now their vendors could be using their data to train LLMs. Am I right about that?
Certainly they could be. I would be skeptical of that, but that is certainly a risk that you, of course, should take in and look into. I am more worried about large companies using it to get an even better profile on you, frankly. Like Google, Meta, or Facebook, using large language models to build a characteristic of you, the really only word that I know for it would be deep fakes. Those are very worrying, in my personal opinion. They're getting better and better every day, and it's getting harder to tell. With just an hour of someone's voice, you can pretty accurately recreate it nowadays. And then also with a large set of, pictures of them, you can also very accurately create videos.
William, I was wondering about the whole deep fake thing from a philosophical perspective. You know how I am. And I was, and I never had a chance really to kind of research this or anything, but I was always wondering about the impact of a deep fake from the other direction. And so might as well bring that up. And so what's the impact? Well, obviously the election impact, there could be a video out there of our favorite candidate saying something that person would never say. Right. And then, down to the level of, we're thinking that do we, fake voices when we do pretext calls that, be pretty easy to call up and have the voice of the person that hired us, given instructions, blah, blah, blah. Right. But the reverse of it, the fact that if there's a video out there of me saying that I'm not an expert in AI, right? Would I be able to say, that's a deep fake? Or is there going to use AI to determine AI, right? How's that going to?
Certainly, to both of those, there are already forensics out there, and forensic techniques that you can use to debunk AI-related videos. And of course, you're going to be able to use AI to debunk AI, but we can talk about that if you'd like. I am very skeptical about using AI to defeat AI as it is right now.
It takes us back to the days of using scripts to check scripts.
Right?
To laugh about, but go ahead. I interrupted you in a thought there.
Plagiarism. Sorry. Checkers. There are lots of colleges are actually forcing AI plagiarism checkers now. The issue is that I said this, I believe, in the last podcast. A lot of those checkers to see if ChatGPT wrote it would mark the Constitution as written by AI. And so they're not reliable, but yet people are trusting them to decide someone's educational or academic future. And it's because people don't simply understand kind of what they're doing or how they work. And so, many people I feel have probably been wrongly accused of writing essays with ChatGPT. Certainly tons are, don't get me wrong. But I'm sure that there are some that didn't fairly and still got accused.
One of the things that, an old guy like me who, I was there when we first started applying data validation principles to pretty much eliminate, I'd say really by the mid 90s, data integrity was no longer a big concern when you looked at the three goals of information security. And then social media was born, right? And then, you know, we've have all these events that, you know, where you just can't trust, you know, information anymore. And so, you know, I feel like, you know, if we take it a little bit further though, one of the things that I'm really looking forward to is in our business, it's always been just amazingly difficult to do a demo because of the fact that we're trying to demonstrate something that requires dynamic data. And so we're looking forward to the, you know, we're not ready. It's certainly not high on our priorities. It seems like all of our, you know, marketing priorities get kind of shoved to the side, but we do love the fact that we're going to be able to generate test and demonstration data in the development processes for our SIEM, you know, using, you know, GPT type technologies. And so my question is can we apply the deep fake attack vector towards data? In other words, you know, our company is going to be able to create large amounts of data that tell their narrative and somehow inject that into somebody's training process. I mean, what's the likelihood of something like that happening? Or just the likelihood of, you know, anything that grabs data, if a man in the middle was to insert different data, is that an attack vector we should be concerned about?
Yes, disinformation is one of the, in my personal opinion, leading worries relating to AI that we have currently. Disinformation it was previously easy to sow with social media. It is more so now, now that it can be automated. You know, you could totally tell a GPT-like model or bot what your narrative is, and you can set it free and tell it to go post on Twitter. You know, set up bots to post on Twitter. And now bots on Twitter have been a thing for a while, right? But it's getting more realistic and it's getting, disinformation is getting easier to sow. And disinformation campaigns are becoming easier to perform. Now, private companies sowing disinformation is a bit dystopian for my liking. I would personally be more worried about governments doing it, of course. But there are a few companies I might be worried about sowing disinformation, particularly the ones that already do. Not confirmed, just by personal beliefs, like Google, you know, Facebook and such. It's kind of due to their size and nature of their business, which is selling data and buying data. That is really their big business there. Which kind of comes with disinformation, and it also ties back into like media related things. How negative press often gets a lot more clicks and such.
We're getting off the beaten path for our audience, which, you know, are people who might be interested in how this applies to smaller businesses, community-based banks, credit unions, that sort of thing. And don't get me wrong, we did touch on it a little bit, and I agree with you that, you know, I don't think fintech. You know, I would hope that even the, you know, the Fiservs, the Jack Henrys, the CSIs of the world would not be using data to train LLMs, large language models, without the permission of their customers. But we are hearing a lot of our clients adding that question into their due diligence, you know, process. That, you know, what are you using our data for besides the process that we can visibly see? Because it might not be training an LLM. It might be, you know, and of course we already have the agreements to not sell that data, but you could do a lot with data without selling it, right?
Right.
And so I would like to kind of circle back around to what kind of changes do you think, you know, affect? I know there's one you had talked to me about, you know, I really think it's kind of interesting that by the time we got finished with our last episode, we were kind of tamping down my paranoia that script kiddies were going to be able to use chat GPTs, right? You know, all this. And boy, you brought up the really good point. Why would they do that if it's all available there on GitHub and that sort of thing? But I'm hearing, though, that there are some things that we're starting to see where large language models could impact our client safety. And so What are you seeing there, William?
I still think that that's disinformation. I feel like that's incorrect. I feel very strongly about this. I'm still very much of the mind that AI is not mature enough to be able to take someone's skill and raise it to a sophisticated level. Um, like I'm gonna give my analogy that I gave last time. It makes low-hanging fruit hang lower, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you get on a ladder and you can climb higher. Um, it 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 does not increase the ability of script kiddies to perform complicated attacks any more that them just using simple scripts would. Um, if anything, you know, GPT shines when you know what you're doing with it, and especially when coding. It shines if you know exactly what you need from it and how to debug it because it's going to break. Sure, it can write really simple scripts when that will work first time. But if you try to write a malware that's going to defeat Sentinel-1, that's not going to be done with ChatGPT, right?
Got it.
It's unlikely to happen without you already having the knowledge to do it yourself. So what it allows for is sophisticated attackers to then do their job quicker.
Yeah. Okay. So they're more sophisticated because they have the advantage of speed and also another take on it. I tell you, a lot of times I use GPT myself, and what I'll do is I'll take something I've written, I'll put it in there and say, hey, write this in a different way, or, argue with this or whatever to get another take on it. But I also feel like, the other thing that tamps down my paranoia is that GPT wouldn't allow them to do it anyway, right? If they said, hey, I want to, design me some malware that would defeat S1, fortunately, these systems all have the guardrails built into them. Am I right about that?
Well, as of recently, there have been a lot more models coming out that are uncensored, that have no guardrails whatsoever. And so, ChatGPT from OpenAI has built in ethics and moral kind of guidelines to follow that allow you to get what you need out of it without necessarily asking how to do illegal things. But as was expected, Worm GPT or GPT for all are both alternatives. Worm GPT being the cybercrime alternative, being on the dark web and such, and being trained on particularly what seems to be more illicit activities. GPT for all being more open source, kind of just models trained by colleges and such, people who have the resources to train them. And also GPT for all, the models that they accept, not all of them are uncensored. In fact, actually, only I know one of them to be uncensored. But the fact remains is that there's still an uncensored model, and I've played around with it. And I assure you there are no ethical guidelines to that particular model.
Well, let's unpack that. I feel like there's a lot you just said there. I'm starting with the fact that, an old guy like me, I was there when Worm stood for write once, read many, and guess what? With immutable backups, that concept's returning, right? So I want to make sure our audience can Google this. So is it Worm, like, spelled like the worm and then just GPT after it?
Yep. Just right. Worm, WORM GPT.
And this is a large language model like ChatGPT, but it's been trained without any kind of ethics guardrail or guardrails, I should say.
Well, it's not that like take OpenAI's ChatGPT. It wasn't trained with the guardrails in place. The guardrails were placed on afterwards.
Okay.
And same thing here. Now, be careful. Worm GPT is, like I said, a cybercrime alternative. You're not going to find it on the ClearNet. And if you want access to it, you're either going to have to download some sketchy leaks or you're going to have to pay for it with crypto. So generally, I would suggest using GPT for all, which is the open source.
All right. So how do you spell that? Is that just GPT and the number 4?
Yes. Yeah. The number 4 all GPT.
And so Worm GPT is you better be careful who you buy it from type, application. Then it's not
Yeah.
something that it'd be like going out and getting a copy of Zeus. You better be careful with it. You better be careful where you're using it, that sort of thing.
Correct. Have an environment set up that is built to deal with potential malware infections and such.
Well, don't do it if you're a banker.
Right. Yeah. No. I'm talking more for people who are. Yeah. Yes. More.
Yeah, but if you're an IT guy at a bank and you have a network at home that's locked down for testing malware or whatever, you would want to use that to explore what Worm GPT can do for you. And so GPT for all, that's a safer, but it doesn't guard. That sounds weird.
Well, it's safer. Well, okay. So first of all, open source software comes with the downsides that potentially anyone can see the vulnerabilities in it, and also which means anyone can audit it, so it's an upside. But it also comes with the downside that it's version controlled through Git, I believe, or GitHub. I forgot which one. Therefore, if someone gains access to that account, they could very easily make updates malicious and perform a man-in-the-middle attack. It's not closed sourced, so it's a little bit easier, in my personal opinion, to perform a man-in-the-middle attack. But with all the understanding risk aside, don't download it on a bank network. Just don't. I mean, why would you? Download it on a personal network at home. GPT-4, although overall is safe, it's now so it's a piece of software that you download to your desktop, and then you can then download models like other LLMs, right? That it can run. So they have a selection to choose from. And as far as I know, they have I think over 20 of them to choose from, all ranging in size, what they're good at, etc., who they were trained by. As far as I know, only one of them isn't censored. I think there might be a couple more. I would have to double check. But the one that I particularly have, that is uncensored, is it's marked as uncensored. Most of the other ones do have ethical guardrails.
And when you say uncensored, really what you're meaning there is there's no aftermath, after training guardrails that prevent someone from asking it to do something that would be illegal.
Yes.
To do it.
Also, I want to amend this statement I said earlier about guardrails not being trained in. I was saying that as in it's not training the raw data sets. It is certainly trained in through weights and biases. And in some way, shape, or forms. But I wanted to make that more clear.
And do these new applications, these wild applications, whatever you want to call them, on the applications where the people aren't worried about being sued, right?
Right.
I mean, OpenAI is going to get sued, right? I mean, they've got deep pockets or whatever you want to say. Mm-hmm. Whereas the makers of GPT for all and then Worm GPT, you're really saying that there's no guardrails whatsoever. Not only on the aftermath, can I ask it questions that you shouldn't ask an AI model? But also the training wasn't that carefully considered from a bias perspective or anything like that.
Well, the training was very carefully considered. These were all trained by people who knew what they were doing, colleges specifically. And so they all are trained very specifically, because if you want an efficient large language model, you have to train it efficiently. But that doesn't mean that it was trained on illicit data necessarily.
Got it.
It was trained on the internet just like ChatGPT was, and the internet has a lot of unsavory things on it. So you can sort of imagine how you don't really need to train it on specifically illicit or uncensored things to get illicit responses from it.
I guess where I've been with this is that OpenAI certainly can't go to the databases on the dark web, so to speak, that has everybody's social security numbers in it and say, hey, bring that into it too. That would be a bad move because get sued for violating a whole bunch of laws, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas I think what you're saying is that these started off as legitimate training modules, that they wouldn't go to the dark web and grab that information and put it in there during the training.
Right. I understand where you're going with this, where like Worm GPT could potentially grab like those illicit records. Let's not forget what these are, though. Yeah, our GPT, they generate the text based off what they think is going. They make it up.
Okay.
So even if you do train it on that data, all it's going to know is what a social security number looks like. It's not going to be able to fetch that for you. Now, is it possible for that to happen? Yes, you could totally train something to do that for you with like a GPT type of model, large language model, it kind of interacted for you to then be able to interact with like said database and such. But just raw training it on or like including that in the training data is not going to mean that you can look up social security numbers through that model.
Got it. Anything else you want to say?
Well, be on the lookout for phishing attack. That is my personal biggest concern when it comes to AI. It's just phishing. It's not hard to run sophisticated phishing campaigns anymore. There's automated softwares that anyone can use.
We have a policy that, anytime there's a phish that looks like it's orchestrated, that looks like it, somebody thought this through, so it could be part of a coordinated attack, right? And we're considering maybe we need to revise it because it's happening 3 or 4 times a week now, where the fishes are just looking that much better. I hear what you're saying here and there. And I think, though, the other thing that you're saying is that whereas before there was a few things that you had to kind of, go through and go around in order to get Chat GPT by OpenAI to help you do a phishing attack. These 2 new applications, there's no bumps, there's no speed bumps in that at all, that they'd be able to go out and facilitate social engineering attacks much better than ChatGPT can.
Yeah, you can straight up ask it. I'm trying to phish a CEO at XX company. This is the email I would like to write. Please write it for me. Like this is the 5. What's that? That won't be the professional word. This is the feeling that I'm going for.
Make it sound like it comes from another CEO.
Or that, or whatever type of phish you're going for.
Well, William, I definitely appreciate your time today. I know you're a busy guy. I'm glad that you're staying out. Did you say you used a couple of those? Have you used the Worm GPT yet, or?
Worm GPT, no. That's a bit
probably shouldn't say if you have, right? No, just kidding.
But Open GPT or GPT for all, yes, I have.
Okay. And it's the open source GPT that and so you've got a little, like a promiscuous box or whatever you want to call it on your home network that you're using that for. So pretty cool. Well, thank you very much for your time. My name is Dan Hadaway.
And Will or William
Summers.
And
this has been an Infotex production. And one last thing I'm supposed to say. Never forget, awareness is 9/11 for the battle.